Welcome to another episode of Afterlife Mysteries. I'm Kalila Smith, and joining me today is my co-host, Billy Roberts. Welcome, Billy.
Hi, Kalila. Nice to be back again.
Wonderful to see you again, as always. So today, Billy and I are going to discuss inside the mind of the medium. All kind of things going on. How does that medium's mind work? And this will be interesting to those who are budding mediums as well as those who just want to get information from mediums. So, Billy, what's been going on with you lately, huh?
Well, regarding mediumship, before we evolved in the most rudimentary form of speech, many esoteric schools of thought believed that we communicated, our prehistoric forebears communicated their thoughts and feelings telepathically. And it was Maurice Maeterlinck, a 19th century dramatist and mystic, who said we probably only developed speech so we could tell lies, if you think about that one. But mediumship is based on telepathy. It's an abnormality in the brain. There's been lots of research done over the last 50 years into the mechanics of mediumship, the psychology of mediumship. We know today that there seems to be hundreds and hundreds, if not thousands of mediums, particularly on Facebook and all these other platforms. It can't all be genuine. Mediumship is quite rare. True mediumship is quite rare. And it's not normal to see so-called dead people, contrary to popular belief, because there is an abnormality in the brain. And mediums are highly strung individuals. They often live on their nerves. They're prone to anxieties and other psychological problems. So we know mediumship is a cross to bear. Mediums are born, they're not made. And I've seen many, many different mediums. And I've been privileged or fortunate to work with some of the veterans of spiritualism over the last 40 years. And I've seen some good and I've seen some bad mediums. Because a medium has a name and is quite well known, doesn't mean to say they're genuine or, in fact, that they're good. You have to ascertain what a medium is and what a medium is not. And mediumship is quite personal. Mediumship doesn't always work for many reasons, because we are dependent on the audience or the people we work with. We can't make people say yes to a piece of information, so we don't know. You know yourself. So what's your opinion, Cleaver?
Well, I tend to agree with you, but I know that since I've been really working with different mediums over the last, 8 to 10 years, I've noticed there's been a trend of certain mediums, and I won't name names, telling people everybody can do this.
Yeah.
Everybody can do this. Somebody even wrote a book, Be Your Own Medium. And, I tend to disagree with that. I think even if everybody could do it, you couldn't do it for yourself. Because even with psychic readings, it's very difficult to read for yourself because you've got your own stuff getting in your way. But, there's a lot of people out there, unfortunately, that are getting misinformation and they're
Yeah.
being led to believe, well, you're a medium, so come on, you take this weekend course and now you can get on out there and, they're in return giving out more misinformation. I went to a gallery reading pretty recently, and I noticed that, and I won't name names, but I noticed that one of the mediums really, I could tell that this person was reading the aura. I could just tell, and a lot of the information that was coming up was kind of vague. Great psychic, wonderful psychic, definitely picking up on things, but I could definitely tell that she was going up and then going up, touching spirit, and then coming back down. And I think that's the hardest thing about being a medium. And I think that that's what takes so much time to really tune in on is being able to stay in that power. And I think that's where people really lose it. Even people who are or could be good mediums,
Mm,
they lose it by really not sitting in the power enough and not being able to maintain staying in the power.
exactly. Yeah. And also, I found that Skeptics, for an example, they make a judgment based on the mediums, alleged mediums they've seen. They might not have seen the genuine ones or the good ones. And a message given to a recipient is quite personal. It might be meaningless to everybody else listening in, but to the person to whom it is given, it opens up a lot of emotional data. And mediumship is personal. And I said before, it doesn't always work. We are dependent on the audience that we work with. If you're working with an audience or in a church, a congregation, and you're only as good as the audience that you work with. So it doesn't always work. And mediumship, I've found, is prone to, it changes. It seems to be cyclic. Certain times of the year, you seem to be on better form than other times of the year. And because we're only human, or so I'm led to believe, sometimes if you don't feel too good, your mediumship doesn't work. And people find it very difficult. What constitutes a good medium? Well, mediumship is about proving the continuity of the soul beyond death, giving information to the person about the person who's passed over. It could be first and second names. It could be the address they lived at, what they died of. But it's not about telling you you've had a difficult week. You're going to meet a tall, dark, handsome stranger. You're going to meet all these different things. That could constitute psychism or intuition, but it's not necessarily mediumship. And people need to understand that. Don't you agree?
Oh, absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. Because like I said, I see that a lot in the United States, especially because I know in Great Britain y'all have a little bit different standards because a lot of the mediums there are working through the spiritualist church,
Yeah.
and I know that they have certain requirements and certain standards that have to be upheld. But here, I noticed there's just a lot of people. They'll just go out here and they're doing everything from doing psychic readings to some of them claiming that they're channeling
Mm.
higher realm spirit. I mean, I've seen people saying that they're channeling Jesus, they're channeling Mother Mary, they're channeling this, they're
Yeah.
channeling that, and it's like, okay, let's reel it back in. Because to me, and this is what I was taught, and this is what I stick with, because I have a mental mediumship circle, but I also have a physical circle, and I stick with the rules of physical mediumship. You have to have evidence. If you don't have evidence, if you do not have anybody there that can validate it, even the spirit, if somebody's talking through spirit direct voice, that spirit, we test it, we give it questions. You have to be able to answer questions because unless you can validate it, is meaningless. I mean, don't you agree that it's got to be validation?
Oh, yeah, yeah, absolutely. And in a lot of cases, I mean, I've seen thousands of mediums over the years and had a few centers where we've trained people, um, some people who had abilities and many who didn't. And I've come to the conclusion that the majority of people, find it easy to step on the mediumistic platform. It's so easy to call yourself a medium today and start doing private readings and shows. And I've seen this, people who've come to my workshop. What one particular guy who will remain nameless used to come to my weekly workshops. And on one particular occasion, he phoned me and he said to me, you talked about the aura last week and you said this and you said that. Can you just reiterate it for me? He said, because I need to remember it for my workshop tonight. And he was
Oh,
doing workshops based on what I was teaching him. Now, this particular guy who wanted Dolly to manage him, he's now abandoned it all and he's now become a magician. He's doing table magic. And I find it a joke. I find it laughable and an insult, really, to the spirit world. They are selective over the people they choose. And sometimes you think they've chosen wrongly. but there's always a method in their madness. They've got majority of disembodied souls have a good sense of humor and
They
can
do.
tolerate, and they do, and you know yourself,
They do.
and you know it's definitely coming back. You'd have a good sense of humor,
Absolutely.
have all the traits they had when they were alive in this world, only more so, and they have a greater freedom. So I think mediumship. I'm long in the tooth now to worry about what people think, because I think that mediumship is, you have to be an ambassador for mediumship. As you've just said, you need knowledge as well as a gift. So when people bombard you with questions about the mechanics of it, clairvoyance and all the different aspects, you need to have knowledge and be able to answer eloquently and concisely. And the majority of people can't do that. You
Right.
can. And
And
I
I think
feel
it's really
is that,
important that people, think about, would you want to be that person that crosses over and has to answer to spirit as to why you were misrepresenting them? I mean, I wouldn't want to be. I think that we have a responsibility, just like, there's a code of ethics, just like with anything, with counseling. There's also, with mediumship, you're representing spirits. So you're representing spirits, you want to represent them right. So if you're giving out false information, that might be that one and only time that that person has the opportunity to get a message from that loved one.
exactly.
And it's not fair to that person, it's not fair to the spirits. And I certainly wouldn't want to have to face those spirits on the other side if I was giving out false information or playing fake medium,
Hmm.
which is even worse because you do have a responsibility. And I think that when we cross over, we will answer for it.
Hmm. Yeah, I think so. I think I've got my own opinions, but there's one particular medium who's quite well known. I won't mention his name, and he's American, so you'll probably read between the lines. And he had a TV program, but what he would do is they'd present him with somebody who wanted a private consultation, and he'd start by saying to them, "Who were you hoping to hear from?" And they'd tell him, "My dad or my son or daughter." And he'd say immediately, "Yes, they're here." And he'd immediately begin to give information from that deceased relative or friend. And the majority of people fall for it. They can't see that it's anybody can work like that. Anybody could perform in that way. And they must know it's not genuine. But he's quite well known, gets away with it, and probably makes a lot of money. And you probably know who I'm talking about, but I'll tell you
Of
later on.
course. I
Uh,
do.
and there's a lot of them,
I do.
a lot of them, and they're not all American either. There have been some English ones as well who've got away with it for many years. But a lot of research has gone into mediumship and the way it works. Um, Ivan Tutinsky was a Polish researcher. He was a scientist at Moscow University, and he compromised his professional integrity by devoting 7 years of his life to studying people's unusual abilities, particularly in children. I know we've spoken about this on a previous program, but he concluded that it was all to do with the pineal gland, the walnut-shaped gland deep in the brain. He said it was larger in a child than in an adult and more developed in a female than in a male. So he concluded that women and children were more sensitive than men. And, a high percentage of mediums are gay. It doesn't make you gay, but a lot of gay people have a sensitivity. They have a propensity towards mediumistic skills. And a lot of them are. You can see a study was made, 60, maybe 70% of male mediums tend to be that way inclined. So he afterwards, his paper was published, and although it was originally ridiculed by his peers, they congratulated him for he was an innovator. He broke down barriers and proved that the brains of so-called mediums or people with unusual skills are not normal. There's an abnormality in the electrical circuitry, particularly at the back of the what's called the bony box, and the way it works. And a lot of mediums who work with clairaudience, this is the ability to hear, often have thyroid problems or even diabetes. They can suffer with diabetes. And, you know, people who are clairvoyant can often suffer with migraines and occasionally with seizures, epileptic seizures, and also depression. Because the actual glands, the chakras, are connected to the hormonal glands. And so there are changes when you develop. If you sit for development under the supervision of a medium to develop your own skills, there are changes in the body that can cause all kinds of changes in your perception of things. Makes you not only more sensitive towards things and people, it will just make you more sensitive, full stop. So it's not an easy ride, as you know yourself. Being a medium is quite difficult.
I think maybe we should go over a little bit for people, because a lot of the people who are watching are not necessarily mediums, nor do they want to be, but a
Yeah.
lot of these people are what we call sitters. These are the recipients of the messages
Yeah.
from mediums. They want to hear from their loved ones. So, you know, why don't we go over some ways that people can decide how to get a good medium? Because there's so many, I don't know about England, but I know here there's just tons and tons and tons of
Oh, yeah.
people advertising,
Same here.
people offering free readings.
Yeah.
Come to me, and you have to really kind of educate yourself onto what to look for in a
Yeah.
medium, as far as how to tell if this person is really giving you good information. For instance, if you go to someone, I mean, I'm in my 60s, okay? So for a medium to come to me and
Not
say,
looking.
you have a, oh, thank you. For a medium to say, you have grandparents on the other side, well, of course I do.
Yeah.
You know, it's a 50-50 shot that I might still have a parent
Yeah.
on this side, but, you know, guarantee you my grandparents are over there. So, you know, you can always hit on a grandparent over there.
Yeah.
Now, if someone says, okay, I've got your grandmother here, she's always with you. She wants you to know that she loves you and she's always with you. If that's the entire message that you get, you should question that and try to get
Exactly.
more. Get something more specific. I
Yeah.
actually had a medium tell me that your grandmother's here. It's on your father's side. Your grandmother's here. Now, I've never had my grandmother come through. I never knew my grandmother. She died 3 months before I was born, and no doubt I'm connected to her, and so forth. And I've heard stories about her, but she's never come through. So I would think the first time she comes through, she's going to tell me a little bit more than she wants you to know she's with you. Okay, well, I know that. I do know that. So it's like, but there was nothing else. There was no consistency. There was no real validating message there. You know, there was something she could have said, because I heard a story recently about my grandmother, and because my grandmother, that particular grandmother, was Cajun, and she was what they call the traiteur, which was a healer, and she had what they called the gift. So this would have been a very big thing to get a message from her. And I learned something very, very specific about her recently, which I won't say in case somebody does ever hear from her. And if they would have said what it was I learned about her and her formulary on some of her remedies, um, I would have known it was her. But just telling me she's with me and she's
That's
proud of
good.
me. It's like, okay, whose grandparent isn't proud of them?
Yeah.
I mean, come on. So you want to get something really specific. One of the readings I had when my daughter first passed away was an incredible reading, and this particular medium, he happened to be giving away free readings to somebody on a grief site, And he, I just put my name on there, and it never occurred to me that he was going to call me. He's now deceased, unfortunately, but he called me and he says, "Hi, I'm here to give you your free reading." And I'm driving in my car coming home from work. It's like 9 o'clock at night, and I'm like, whoa, okay. And he says, "We don't seem very excited." And I said, "I just wasn't expecting to win. I usually don't win things." So I'm driving from the French Quarter through the downtown, stopping at red lights, and he's just going away, telling me about, your father had, there were 5 kids, there was this, your aunt, someone named Margaret, and she's with Robert. Well, I had an Aunt Margaret, I had an Uncle Bob, and he kept saying Anna, and then there's Anna. It's like, there was no Anna. Well, she says her name's Anna, and I'm like, no, there was no Anna. Well, it turned out that my Aunt Lily was actually Anna Lillian, but I didn't know that. I found that out later. So he's going on and on. Now, meanwhile, all this time I'm driving. It happened to be one of my granddaughter's birthdays. So I'm meeting them at a snowball stand, and I'm still on the phone with him, and I'm flagging them down, and I'm handing them a credit card, and they're going to follow me to the little pizza place because they're going to have a slumber party. So we're doing all of this in the background. He has no idea all of this is going on. He thinks I could be sitting home in front of a TV for all he knows. So by that time, by the end of the reading, and he just keeps giving me this reading, and he did the whole medical intuitive thing. I mean, this guy, and I'm thinking to myself, he's not hitting on my daughter. This would be the big thing here. So I'm sitting outside of this little pizza place, and I'm watching my granddaughter and the girls in there getting their pizzas. And he suddenly says, "I have your daughter here." And I'm thinking to myself, finally. And he says, "What? You want me to say what?" And then he mumbles. He says, "I don't know why she's talking about pizza." And he says, all right, I'll say it. He says, "I don't know why she wants me to say this, but she said to say it exactly like this. She said, 'I want some pizza. I like pizza too, get me a piece.'" Now, Billy, when he said that, I mean, it was just the exact way she would have said it. Like you talk about the sense of humor.
Yeah.
And I was so shocked. And then I burst out laughing. And he says, "What are you laughing at?" And I said, "Freddie," I said, "I'm sitting in front of a pizza restaurant right now and waiting for my granddaughters to come up. And there's no way this man could have known this." And at that point, I knew this guy was in touch with my daughter, because there was no mistaking that. And that's the kind of thing you want to look for, guys. That's the kind of thing, that's the kind of information you want. You may not even get it right away.
Yeah.
You may not get, somebody may say something. I've done readings for people where I've seen things, and it was a relative they did not know during their life that had passed away, either when they were a child or before they were born. But they come back later and they'll show me a photograph that the parent gave them to validate it, and it would be the exact same thing I described. That you want those kind of details in there. And one of the things I learned from one of my mentors, whom I've studied with a lot, is a lot of these mediums want to just tell you how they died. They want to tell you how they died. Well, again, that can be very vague as well. Okay, because I've seen mediums go, well, something happened to the head, and then somebody goes, "Oh yeah, they had a stroke." Well, you fed the medium. That's the one thing you do not want to do. You do not want to feed the medium.
Exactly.
You don't want to give any information whatsoever. You sit and you just listen. Take notes if you have to. Write it all down. Take notes. And then after the reading's over, validate, see if there's any validation there. But you want specific things. And one of the things, that I have been taught by this particular medium that I've studied under quite a bit is does that medium get the essence of that person? Is that essence of that personality coming through? Because they do have their personalities, just as Billy said. They have their sense of humor. They have whatever it is. When someone comes through me, I've started dancing, or moving a certain way, or walking a certain way with a limp, and it's to, their essence is coming through to actually feel that who that person was, because that person's more than just how they died. You're not going to, you want to remember somebody, and they want to be remembered, not by how they died, but who they were.
Exactly.
And there'll be little things. I mean, what advice would you give on this?
Well, you hit the nail on the head about giving information. Some people are professional message takers, and they have a way of extricating messages from mediums. And mediums can be very astute and very good at getting information from people. I don't mean genuine mediums. I'm talking about the not so genuine. The other point, recommendation is always the best way to find a medium. If a name keeps coming to you, all the time, then you can rest assured that that medium would be trustworthy. And you make a judgment for yourself, though. You have to always ascertain your own medium, and then be truthful with yourself. And the other thing which I've written about in one of my books called Psychology of a Medium, genuine mediums don't travel, or they can't travel, because if, for an example, mediums in Liverpool, in England, or in London, names are different. You have a gambit of names. A lot of the alleged genuine mediums, and they're not, they give out these names of people in the town they live in. They're always accepted. But when that medium moves into a different area, from Liverpool to London, or even to America, names are completely different, and they fall flat on their faces. I mean, where would you hear Kalila? You certainly don't get Kalila in the UK. Not that I know of, anyway. Billy, on the other hand, is universal. It's in America, and it's also, but I'd like to think not many Billies are around, but you understand what I mean. So
Right.
mediums can be very, very cunning, developing mediums, because they don't travel, and also some of them are very crafty, very cunning, the way they work, and you can tell they're only in it for the money. And that's my take on it, anyway.
Yeah, it's interesting, but I think people need to be warned. I really do. I think, that's it is a big money making, industry. It really is. It has become that.
Yeah,
Um, and and I'm not saying do things, give readings for free. Certainly not saying that, because there should always be compensation for anything you do. There
yeah,
should be compensation, but definitely there are people doing it for either the money, or lots of times it's the ego. I see a lot of ego. I see a lot of ego in this, and as with other industries, there's a lot of people to do it for look at me, and I think people just really they want to walk away with something, and I can't think of anything sadder for somebody to walk away and go, wait a minute, why would that be all that my grandmother would have said to me?
exactly. Yeah.
Why would that have been the only thing she would have said? She's with me all the time, really? See, it doesn't make any
But
sense.
the thing I've noticed, that since mediums have been on the television, good or bad, it seems to have made people more discerning. They can make a judgment. They're not so easily conned, if you like. And even the ambiguity of some messages, people will, I've known people to dissect them and say, well, what does that mean? Because, as you said, your grandmother's here. All my parents are in the spirit world. My mum was a medium. My dad was Jewish. And my grandmother was a medium. My aunt was a medium. So it runs in certain families as well. It tends to be genetic in some, as it is in yours, whether it's through mediumship or some other area. Um, so you have to be very, it depends what you're consulting a medium for. That's another thing. Some people run their lives by what mediums tell them, and they'll have their favorites and they'll run them. If you go to a medium often enough, if that medium's not genuine and doesn't have any principles, ethics, if you go to them often enough, they'll know your life. They'll know you inside out.
Oh, absolutely.
And you might forget what you've told them, but they'll
Mm-hmm.
know everything, and they'll give it you back. And so their reputation grows. So you do have to be very careful with mediumship. And because mediumship is experimental, it doesn't always work. You need something to fall back on if you're doing a demonstration, a psychic ability, whether it's reading auras or whether it's just intuitively gleaning information from somebody, because you can't call people back. Nobody has the power to call um, your deceased relative back, they're either there or they're not.
That's
And
right.
that's mediumship at its
That's
best.
true. No, that's true. That's very true. And I can always feel when spirit has left. When it leaves, I feel it.
Yeah,
It's like
you
they,
can.
it's that vacancy, and it's like, okay, they're gone. That's it.
Yeah,
They're gone. There's no,
yeah.
there's no more. But I've noticed that sometimes people will come with expectations, and that's the other thing, that the advice that I would give to people who are sitters, don't go with expectations. I only want to hear from this one person, because the person that comes through may not be the person you want to hear from.
Yeah, exactly.
It
That's
might not be that beloved aunt that you have. It might be, the cousin that you hated,
yeah,
or the grandfather who didn't like you, or whatever
that's
the
it.
case may be. It might be that one relative that you didn't particularly care for, but that person may have a
Mhm.
message for you. That
Yeah,
person may have something to say to you that's going to be meaningful. And the other thing is, you have to realize it's not just for the sitter. It's an equal thing. It's a give and take. It's
yeah,
also for the person on the other side, for their spiritual development.
yeah,
Sometimes they have to say they're sorry. Sometimes they have to clarify maybe something that went wrong in the relationship, or
yeah,
apologize for something, and that's part of their development.
yeah.
And one of the saddest things I ever saw, this was many years ago, in the early part of when I was studying physical mediumship, and we were at a table tipping session, and we had some sitters there as well as the mediums, and there were several mediums that were involved. I just happened to be there. I wasn't really the main medium, let's just say, because table tipping, you've got your main medium, then you got your batteries. So I was just there to give energy, to help give energy into the room. And one of the sitters had someone come forth, and the main medium, who was a very famous medium at that time, doing physical mediumship, he starts describing this individual. Well, I happened to see the shadow across the room. I mean, we're practically a totally dark room, but I see the silhouette of this guy standing there. And I'm watching. I can't say anything because it's not my place to give the reading. And they describe it to this gentleman, and he says, I don't want to talk to him.
Mhm.
And the medium's like, no, really, he has something to say to you. He wants to speak to you. Be open to it. And the medium start trying to coax him to listen. And he says, I didn't like him. I don't want to talk to him. And I could literally see that spirit kind of shrinking back. And I mean, it was just heart wrenching to watch. Here this person's reaching through from the other side, trying to give and the person refused to take it. And I thought, wow, wow. I wonder
Yeah,
what the domino effect that was karmically. It was like, oh man, that's not that can't be good. So when somebody's trying to say something to you, maybe you didn't like them, maybe you don't want to forgive them, but let
Mhm.
them speak their piece, accept their message. Whether you like it or not, accept their
Exactly.
message. Let them speak their piece, because they need it. It's not just for the sitter, it's also sometimes for that individual to kind of clear up some things that were going on in their life with
Yeah,
certain individuals. And they're here, they come back to have to,
yeah,
mend whatever it was that might have been broken, or explain something, or just get it off their chest. I mean, it's important to allow them to give their message and accept their message.
exactly.
um,
Yeah.
One of the things that I always thought was so nice when I was learning Spiritism, and I learned it originally in Santeria, and when somebody would give you a message, the recipient would always say, peace and light to your spirit. That's it. Whether you like them or not,
Yeah.
offer them peace and light at least. Thank you for the message, peace and light to your spirit. And, you don't have to like the message, you don't have to like the person,
Exactly.
but let it come forth, because that's
I,
really important.
you made a good point there because there are two things. You can't, as I said before, you can't pick and choose. If you see a medium because you've lost your mother and that's all you want to hear from, then you're not fighting a losing battle. because anybody, you just open the door as a medium, and it could be anybody, it could be an old neighbor, and that neighbor might be instrumental in eventually bringing your mother forward. The other thing I've found over the years, which a lot of mediums find hard to believe, and that's that not everybody wants to communicate. Not everybody who passes over feels a need to communicate. It doesn't matter how much sorrow they've left behind. Sometimes they don't want to communicate for many, many reasons. Because often it's because of probably the way they died sometimes, which brings back a lot of really painful memories for them, and certainly the last moments of their life. But I've experienced this quite a few times over the years, where some people don't want to communicate. And there's some hilarious ones as well, where I think I mentioned to you once before, I was doing a theatre in Barrow-in-Furness. And initially I start off working clairaudiently. And it was a capacity theatre. And a voice said inside my head, I want you to go to my wife. And I can't remember his name, but say his name was Harry or something. And he said, I've only been passed over a couple of weeks. So I looked for his wife. He said she had a red coat on, and there were a few people with red coats. I said, I'm looking for Louise. And this woman put her hand up. And immediately when I said, I've got Harry here, she began to cry, and she was consoled by her friends either side of her who proffered a tissue. And then this voice boomed inside my head. I don't know why she's crying. She made my life a bleep misery. And I just wanted to tell her that I am with my first wife, Anne. And that was it. So I looked at this woman who was almost hysterical. And I said, Harry is saying he loves you very much. And I moved away. And I tell the story. It is a true story. And Dolly says to me, you should never, ever tell that story to an audience, because the audience will think you're lying to them over the message. And I don't say it now, but it's a true story. And it's what you've just said, Sometimes you don't like a person, and it can work the other way around, the other side of the coin, where the person comes back to make their feelings felt. Because they don't change. They're still humorous, they still have a personality. They don't have a body, and that's the only difference.
Interesting.
Yeah.
And you never felt bad about not. I guess you would have felt bad if you would have delivered the message.
Yeah, I mean,
I guess there's been messages that come forth that
yeah,
mediums are not comfortable saying.
yeah.
Fortunately, I've never had that situation.
I mean, this
But
was when I was a younger, more radical medium, and initially I didn't affect me, but later on, even now, I think back, what should I have done? Maybe I should have turned my back on the lady and said, I'm not with you, and gone to somebody else. I don't know, but anyway, I did the dastardly deed.
yeah, I don't know how. I mean, honestly, I don't know how I would have handled that. I don't
Yeah,
know. It is uncomfortable, and you wouldn't want to make her feel worse.
yeah, exactly.
So a message shouldn't.
She was
Shouldn't go.
obviously not a nice person. But mediums are damned if they do and damned if they don't. It doesn't matter how good you are. Skeptics will pull you down. If you're not
Absolutely.
good, you'll be pulled down anyway. And mediumship is like, so you need broad shoulders to be a medium. And people are they wrongly assume that as soon as you have an ability, that's it. It's not it, because you need to refine it. And sitting with a circle and sitting with a reputable medium, somebody who's mature and has a lot of knowledge, who can guide you, then that's important to give you some kind of grounding, knowing how to turn it on and off. Because giving messages all the time to somebody, you know, you're out in the street and you start feeling things for people, that's wrong, because it can be very unhealthy. So mediumship, it needs discipline. It needs you to be sort of, you need ethics, you need principles, and you need you need to know when to give a message, whether it's right or whether it's wrong. You need to care for people. And that's hard, really, to care for somebody you don't like, because I've been in that position where, somebody is in dire need of help, and you know instinctively that they're not nice people. And I've had dealings with them before, and I didn't like them, and they don't like me, but you can help them. So it's laying aside all your fears, animosities, and becoming a different, like an actor, really, playing a different part on stage. Church mediumship is something completely different. And I always suggest to people who are looking for mediums to go to their local spiritualist church, first of all. They're not always going to find a genuine medium there, but at least you're safe, you're secure in a religious environment, or even a center. It's supervised and it's run properly. And that's the way to find a medium on recommendation, I think.
That's good advice. Now we don't have spiritualist churches
Oh, don't
here.
you?
No, not well. We do. We have a few,
Yeah.
but not in abundance like you do there. I mean,
Yeah.
that is a huge, religion there, and there's a lot of them now. There's a few up in New England. There's several up there, but like here, for instance, in New Orleans, we don't have that. Um, you don't have it's not the same thing. So it's a little bit different. It's a little bit, mediumship is very separate from religion and church. And for instance, with most of my training, which came, like I said, from Spiritism, um, and through Santeria and more of the African religions, it was always very separate. The mediumship was very separate from the actual religion. So when they were doing religious things, it was religious things, but the what they called the spiritual misas, the mass for the dead, where they were doing mediumship, it was strictly mediumship, but very very different from the spiritualist church. As you know, when I came
Yeah.
to Cornwall and did the platform with you,
Yeah.
I did things that were like shocking. I'll never forget the lady that was offended that I walked into the audience, and I because I needed to get closer to someone, and I put my hand on someone's shoulder to I asked before I put my hand on her, but I made more of a connection with her to try to get a closer connection to her spirits. And I was told later you weren't supposed to do that. Well, I didn't know I wasn't supposed to do that because I wasn't trained with those kind of rules. I
Yeah.
had learned those kind of rules kind of later, going to some of the spiritual churches here, but not, like up north. But, that's
But you
not
still,
how I was trained.
people still talked about you for some time. And they still talk about you now. I was talking to somebody the other day when Dolly was in hospital, and she came to see you at the particular venue you did. And she was asking, when are you coming back? I was telling her about this thing we're doing, and that we're
Yeah.
trying to get you back. And all her friends were in awe. So you went down really well that time. See, American mediumship is different
Yeah.
to the British way of working. We do have a lot of spiritualist churches, and I've been the president of one in Southport some years ago now. I was president for, must have been 3 or 4 years, and it was probably the worst job I've ever had in my life, being a president of a church. So much bickering, jealousy, and backstabbing. And you find that it's very rife in spiritualism. As you know, spiritualism was made a religion in 1953 as the result of something called the Majority Report. And this was the Archbishop Lang, the Archbishop of Canterbury. He'd heard so much about spiritualism and what goes on in the spiritualist church. He appointed 10 signatories to investigate it. And these weren't spiritualists. These were people from all walks of life. I think there was one spiritualist. And the report was actually secreted away for, I think, 10 years. until the Psychic News, who I write for, brought it into the light. And it was found that 7 out of the 10 signatories were actually in favor of spiritualism. They said, if you discount the phenomena that goes on within the confines of the spiritualist church, healing, mediumship, all these different things, then you have to discount the New Testament because it's one and the same phenomena.
That's right.
Then it was made by an act of parliament, a recognized religion. And for many, many years, it still wasn't accepted as a bona fide religion. People today will say, the girls' night out, let's go to the spooks. Let's go to the spooks. So it doesn't have the same reverence, the same spirituality that the ordinary church has. So it's interesting, spiritualism.
Yes, it is. It really is. And it's I don't feel like I got enough. I was going for a while to Lilydale, but of course COVID happened and I wasn't going back up there, but I don't feel like I got enough of that. But I
Yeah,
had so much of the other side of things, and that's basically how I work is with basically the spiritist philosophy because that's what I was accustomed
yeah,
to, and that's what I became very comfortable with. So as much as I've learned from spiritualists, I still fall back on the other just because that's kind of where my roots are. So let's give one last little piece of advice to budding mediums. I mean, if I had to give you one piece of advice to someone who's learning to be a medium or thinks they're a medium or wants to explore that for themselves, learn from as many different mediums as you can. Don't get one person and make them your guru. Don't
exactly.
do it.
Yeah,
I think that it's very important. And explore other paths. Go to, find a Kardecian spiritist group. You find there's not too many of them here in Louisiana, but there are in Florida. And I think Chicago has a lot of them. But find, there's the internet is a vast way of finding things. Don't study mediumship long distance with just one guru. I heard of somebody, well, I'm becoming a medium, but I only see him on the internet. And no, go to places. You got to get out. You got to travel. You got to go to places. You got to
yeah,
go to workshops and study under different mediums. And
yeah,
just like with anything else, take what you can get from each one. Take what you need and leave the rest behind and develop your own style. Because if you're going to be a medium, you're going to be a medium anyway. But if you want to be a
exactly.
good medium, learn from as many people as you can, and you'll find what
Yeah,
fits you best. Don't you think?
I absolutely agree. And also read as much as you possibly can, as many different books as you can. I mean, I think I mentioned to you before, I read books by Yogi Ramacharaka.
Yeah, those are
And
good. Yeah,
when you read them, and you think, cry,
yeah.
these,
Ancient text. Check them out. Well, Billy, I don't mean to cut you short, but
right?
it's already that time. It always goes
Oh,
by so fast. And
yeah,
we can always say to be continued and discuss a little bit more of this and get more into some of these Eastern philosophies because Billy has studied a lot of the Eastern philosophies and put them together. So it's not just one path, it's many, many traditions that come into play here. But I want to thank you, Billy, for coming
thank you,
and
Kalila.
joining us this morning. It's always a pleasure and an
Yeah,
honor to have you here. And I want to thank everybody out there for coming in and joining in again. Hope you'll join us again for another episode of Afterlife Mysteries. Until then, bye bye.
bye bye.